A very good welcome to all of you, and thank you for the invitation to me to talk about the state repression of freedom of thought in the context of academic freedom, or rather unfreedom in India. So, when I have to talk about this, I have made a lot of points, and I often feel like the most important intellectuals who should actually be having this conversation are in prison, and that's possibly the reason why somebody like me, who is a writer, is having to take this up and talk about it. So now it marks 3 years since one of the largest political conspiracy cases has unfolded in India. This is called the Bhima Koregaon case. More than 16 scholars, activists, lawyers, academics, and cultural activists have been arrested in this Bhima Koregaon case, and they're accused of planning to assassinate the nation's prime minister. Of course, everybody knows that this is a major conspiracy, and the entire case has been cooked up from scratch. In fact, they've made use of Israeli spyware like Pegasus and malware and all kinds of hacking to get into the computers of these academics and intellectuals and to frame them in this case. And one of the arrested in this case, the 84-year-old Jesuit priest Stan Swami, passed away on the 5th of July 2021, which is a national shame. It is a national tragedy. It really points out to Father Stan Swami might be a Jesuit priest. He's very old. He suffered from Parkinson's disease. All of these are spoken about him. But what is also important is that he referred to himself as a sociologist, and his contribution to understanding the life of Adivasi people in India, to understanding their struggle and to understanding their citizenship and their forest rights, all of it, he was at the heart of these struggles. So I would like to actually even talk about the death of Father Stan Swami as an attack on academic freedom. What happens to people who study oppressed people? And even as we speak about them, we also have to. I wanted to speak about several people, but I think one of the most, once again, very important cases that come out of India is India's most prominent public intellectual, Dr. Anand Teltunde, who has been incarcerated in this case and now has spent about a year and a half in prison. And he was targeted for being a long-term critique of the Hindutva project. He had exposed how a program of saffronization was being pushed through universities to counter the influence of radical ideologies, and that citadels of progressive thought in India were made into special targets of suppression through the arrest of students and the sedition charges. This would apply to the Jawaharlal Nehru University, the JNU, as well as several other university campuses. Dr. Anand Teltunde had spoken of the urgency of the regime to achieve Hindu Rashtra, or a Hindu nation, in his words, a Brahmanic fascist state. Others incarcerated in the same case include Dr. Hani Babu and Dr. Shoma Sen, who were known for espousing affirmative action and feminism, respectively. So, in looking at the attack on university campuses, I also want to go back to say that the ways in which state repression is apparent in university spaces begins at the time of admissions, where affirmative action that ensures access for students from historically oppressed castes, classes, and genders are made difficult to access. Classrooms are often exclusive spaces occupied by dominant groups and networks. Faculty appointments are controlled by dominant castes, and finally, the syllabus is saffronized to serve the interests of the current regime. The takeover of university space extends into blatant caste-based harassment of teachers and students. The attack on books dealing with histories and literature of resistance is rampant and backed by administrative support. I know of all of this, and I also speak from personal experience, because when we speak about history, at the moment we have a regime that is trying to introduce mythology and call it as history. We also have a regime where, right-wing student groups like the ABVP actually criticize, and this is a personal example, have criticized the Delhi University for including my work under Indian writing in English, and the critique was that I should be replaced by someone like Prem Chand, who doesn't even write in English, but he's a great writer, but the fact is that when we are doing anything critical of the regime, then the regime, yeah, doesn't want you to be represented in any manner possible, any manner whatsoever. So the targeting of these well-known academics in the Bhima Koregaon Elgar Parishad case is the most visible example of targeting academics for expressing dissenting views in the public domain that call into question the edifice of Brahminical Hindutva ideology. And when I want to speak of this, I also want to say that attack on universities also speak of the privatization of education, which is happening in a very rampant manner. And this goes hand in hand with the denial of social justice, with increase in fees, making ring fencing education so that the poor and oppressed sections cannot enter it, inaccessible to a vast majority of students. It further alienates students from access to education by ignoring the digital divide. And there's already structural disadvantages faced by students all over the country. And most importantly, the Modi regime at the moment is trying to push through a national education policy, which is basically harking back to the Manusmriti, harking back to the ideology of caste system, harking back to legitimizing education based on hereditary labor, education based on the caste system, and also introducing at least 5 public exams during the years of schooling, which is going to lead to a lot of filtration and dropout rates. So this chokehold on education in India is a very alarming thing and doesn't really get the attention that it deserves. And having said this, I also think that this national education policy disempowers teachers in classroom teaching and introduces managerial and organized learning, actively removing the scope for critical thinking, and finally introducing corporate funding into education in the name of quality, while the government washes its hands of public programs for education. So all of these is showing about how there's also academic freedom has been repressed through the control on student politics by following the Lindo Committee recommendations. So there's a complete control over campus activities and police action. The police literally entered into the Jamia University campus. They tear gassed the library, and students were dragged, and so they had to take shelter. So the kind of police action against students who are protesting extremely arbitrary citizenship laws once again throws light on the state of academic freedom. And one more thing that I want to also highlight has been the systematic dismantling of educational fellowships, and especially fellowships that should be going to Dalit students has been consistently denied to them, thus keeping them out of academia. And here I just want to conclude by talking about when we talk about freedom, academic freedom in the academic freedom in India, we should also talk about the composition of academia in India. So the assault on academic freedom does not have to only mean that political dissidents are punished, jailed, and silenced. What is often ignored, even by India's predominantly upper caste bourgeois liberals, is that the composition of academia is subjected to extreme guarding and gatekeeping. Irrespective of the ideological makeup of the faculty body, the composition remains 90% Brahminical in the elite taxpayer-funded institutions and private universities. I would also go on to argue that keeping the educational system Brahminical is part of the BJP state ideology of Hindu Rashtra, based on the scriptural injunctions which declare that the intellectual superiority to Brahmin, especially Brahmin men, and exclude the rest of the population from education. And this also leads us to take the question, why is academic dissent in India feel so feeble and feel like such a whimper? Because literally when there's such assault, students and everybody should be on the streets, and affirmative action is rigorously not being implemented, is also another way in which the state is repressing freedom. In keeping the faculty body extremely Brahminical, not to mention male, there is a de facto consensus for a patriarchal Hindu state. Further, when the vast majority of the faculty belong to a particular caste or class group, we cannot expect radical education, and what we can expect is only absolute silence and token gestures, which we are witnessing in the face of repression. And here I want to say that the body politic of academia in India does not represent the body politic of India. So when we have to talk about the repression that the system of academics faces, we also have to talk about how this is on the one hand very crucial at this point, but also on the other hand that that itself is a very rarefied realm, and that we have to look for other venues of protest outside of the system. So I have spoken for, I think, quite a long time. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I'm really sad that I cannot join you in person today, but I really make a personal appeal to all of you to use whatever platform that you can find to demand the release of those arrested under the Bhima Koregaon, to demand the release of the students who were arrested as part of fighting against the discriminatory citizenship laws, and to highlight what's happening in India, including the denial, the systematic denial for hundreds of years of the reservation policy. So thank you very much for this opportunity.